In today's lecture, we are going to discuss how to write a scientific paper. In other words, we are going to see what are the guidelines that we need to employ for writing a scientific paper. So as I told you, I would be explaining certain aspects of this, and I will be browsing through other aspects because they could be merely informative. Okay. So what are the features of writing a scientific paper? A scientific paper should be exhaustive. Now, what is the meaning of exhaustive? It should be able to cover all possible aspects of the topic that you have chosen. Now, when I say all possible aspects, you should keep in mind it is pertaining to the particular topic that you have chosen, which implies the topic you have chosen must be something that is researchable within the given time and within the given space of writing the paper. So you cannot choose a topic which you can study for your entire lifetime, which you cannot exhaust. So that is already an interrelated idea that I am presenting. It should be cohesive and unified presentation. It cannot be scattered ideas. You may have wonderful ideas, but completely unrelated, one unrelated to another. It cannot be that. Right from the beginning till the end, there is a certain way in which the whole of paper stands unified. So you cannot have dissipated ideas. You say one thing and again you say something else, scattered thoughts. It's like nice reflective ideas, yes, but if they don't hold together, then it cannot be considered a scientific paper. Thirdly, it must be well documented. Now, what do we mean by well documented? You must be able to substantiate or justify what you are saying by giving reference to the opinions and the ideas of the experts in that particular field of inquiry. So that is what is meant by well documented. So you must be able to somehow show that your line of thinking can be justified, can be considered acceptable. That's the meaning of justified or substantiated by people who are already experts in that field, by referring to their ideas, their works, and then that must be clearly stated there. If you don't state from where you took this idea, then you would be considered as copying the material or lifting the material, which is technically called plagiarism. And plagiarism is a serious offense, not only from the academic point of view, even otherwise, because there is something called patent right and so on. Even from the legal point of view, plagiarism can be a serious offense. Fourthly, there should be clarity and precision. You should be very clear in your mind what you are saying, and you should be very precise. You cannot beat around the bush. It cannot be like some kind of old lady say, repeatedly saying the same thing over and over again. There was a nice priest. He was struggling to do his masters when I was doing my PhD. So he used to come to me for help. Then I used to tell him, you see, what is the point of making this statement in your paper? Because you have said it earlier. Now you are only repeating that. Every second sentence you are repeating what you have said. You don't do that. Then he said, excuse me, Nishant, you should understand my problem. I was in our regional catechetical center. When we publish our catechism book, this is what we write. We keep repeatedly saying the same thing. What is Holy Trinity? Holy Trinity is to believe in one God, but three persons. In other words, if our belief is about three persons but still one God, that would be considered Holy Trinity. Therefore, Holy Trinity basically implies one God but having three persons. Same thing. You're not saying anything. You remember that begging the question, that fallacy I mentioned to you some time back? You may like to bring to mind the circular argument. saying the same thing. There's no argument whatsoever. You don't develop the idea. You repeat the same thing in different words. That is a very, very poor way of writing any paper for that matter, let alone scientific paper. So sometimes it is like we are so used to this kind of talk, for us. In a classroom, yes, you may like to repeat. Like for example, I do repeat some of what I am saying to you so that I can drive the point home. I can hit it, hard, hit the nail hard so that it enters right through. But you cannot do that when you write a paper. You are writing to people who are learned. And you cannot just take them for granted as if they are school children or something. You cannot take them for granted as though they are completely idiots. No, they are not. So it's very important that you keep that in mind. Clarity and precision. The clarity comes very often already in your mind. If it is clear, it finds expression naturally in your paper. If you are totally confused, your paper will be very confused. Again, precision, to the point, state to the point. Don't say unnecessary things. So that is, again, we'll come to some of those aspects shortly. It should be dispassionate and objective. What do you mean by dispassionate and objective? There are certain things that we are very emotionally involved, that we are passionate about, we like. Like for example, I am very passionate about natural ice cream. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that I should argue in favor of natural ice cream just because I happen to be passionate about it. Are there enough reasons for me to state that is the best for ice cream that is available? So I should be able to have certain objective, independent of my likes and dislikes, that's the meaning of objective here, to find whether it is the best one. You see, it should be dispassionate. You cannot just be swayed away by your passion. So that would not make it a scientific paper. That would be very good for your personal memoir about what you like and so on. For some people who are interested to know about your choice in life, that's fine. But that doesn't make it a scientific paper. Finally, it should be a critical study. Now, very many times, this is the particular aspect many students, including a master's students, and even sometimes I'm sad to say doctoral students struggle a lot. They think a scientific paper is a faithful repetition of the ideas of the author or authors whom you have read. No, you don't faithfully repeat their ideas. If you have to do that, I don't need to read your paper, I can read them. You are not merely reiterating what others have said, you are critically analyzing what they have said. Now when I say again critically analyzing does not mean you have to find fault with them. I am very sometimes skeptic about the use of words, because critical doesn't mean you are finding fault. Critical means analyzing, looking at why this is a worthwhile idea, what are the ways in which this is helpful and what are the ways it is not. So it is that way, critical. It is not, critical means you have to be saying all negative things. No, some people think critical means you have to be all negative about a particular, no, that's not the point here. So these are the ways in which you could, these are some of the features of the scientific. The last one is parsimony. Now, parsimony basically is economy of words. I'll come back to each of these things in little more detail. I may skip through if I have already explained it adequately. Let us now come to this idea of exhaustive discussion. Basically, you need to discuss the topic in detail and in depth. So what is the difference between in detail and in depth? In detail means it is very broadly you should cover all the aspects. In depth means you have to not superficially just cover that, but you have to go into the deeper aspects of that particular topic. So very often we may tend to remain at the superficial level. We have to go deeper, means you have to, it's not merely broad in detail, but also deep. It's like, you may think of the analogy of the well. If you are digging a well, you want to have a deep well. So because you want a deep well, you wouldn't say, well, I will start with just 1 square feet. No. If you want to have a deep well, you should begin broad. Then you start cutting down and down and down. It goes deep. You cannot begin very narrow as well. Sufficiently broad. It cannot be too broad. Sufficiently broad. So it has to be detailed. Then you go deeper and deeper to dig the well. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the water. So that would be the analogy that may be helpful for you to keep in mind. Again, this is the same idea. It is not a superficial treatment. So you need to touch all important aspects of the theme, at least what is pertinent to your research question. Now, this is something, a principle you should have it clearly engraved in your mind and heart and in your whole of being. All that is relevant to the topic should be said, and all that is said should be relevant. You cannot leave out any important relevant aspect of the topic, and only what is relevant to the topic you should say. You don't say about all irrelevant aspects. Sometimes we tend to kind of go on speaking about many other things because we happen to like it. Cohesive and unified presentation. What do we mean by that? There should be a logical progression in the way the ideas are organized in the paper. Logical progression simply means this. Every sentence that you say must lead logically to the next sentence you are saying. And the next sentence you are saying should logically lead to the following sentence. So what is said about the sentence is also said about the paragraph. The first paragraph must logically take you to the second paragraph. In other words, the second paragraph should naturally follow the first paragraph. It cannot be seen as arbitrarily just added there to fill the page. So otherwise it will become problematic. So sometimes people tend to make it as though they can say anything they want and get away with it. No, that is not the way in which it is done. So it should be very logically organized. Sentences, okay, that's what I said, related to sentences and paragraphs to be paragraphs. So the whole paper have a unity of purpose. There is a particular purpose. You remember what is the purpose? You want to establish a claim that you have somehow, by your reading of the paper, have come to conclude. You have a certain conclusion. You have to show. The whole of that paper should logically, gradually lead to that one singular point that you want to affirm through various reasoning process and arguments one after another. So that should be the focus. If you lose that, then it is problematic. Well documented again. You have to give evidence. Substantiate with evidence the ideas that you have. Now this evidence can be citing authorities. I said here to use sources, say a particular person is expert in that field, so you refer to that person's work and ideas. You can give sometimes historical data. Again, that where do you find? You find it in some written literature. You can have a research data. This is what I said, social science scientists, they use that. You have a questionnaire, survey questionnaire. For example, if you remember, there was a kind of evaluation of the online. Now, you cannot just, at random say students have difficulty in online class, this and that. You need some evidence. So how do you say have a survey and then collect the data from the students? So you ask the specificity about that, what kind of difficulties they have, about internet, about the gadget that they have, about the use of the app, etc. So each of the questions, so finally you have an evidence, we have it with us, this many percentage of the students have difficulty and this many percentage of, that is the research data. That is done by, that research that is done by the IT cell of JDV. So we have that any time, at least at that point in time when students were asked these questions, these many students have problem with internet, at least 40 to 45% of them said the internet is not stable, 30 of them said it's very good, 20 of them said it's rather good, occasionally bad. You got very different ways in which so you interpret the data, and according to the data, then you say how you can modify the way you have your lecture. Now, that is the purpose for that data here for us. Whereas other data could give us another purpose which you will be using in interpreting and understanding and perhaps sometimes implementing. So that is the research data. Sometimes it could be personal experience, but then you be careful about this personal experience thing. Unless the personal experience is something that can be accessible to other persons as part of their experiences. So you cannot speak about some experience which nobody else can have access to. In a normal experience, like for example, you can say, I live in a place where there are a lot of migrant workers. So in my particular locality, at least 80 persons among 80% of the people are migrant laborers. Okay, this is from a personal experience, you will say that. But this is equally accessible to anybody else with regard to anybody's locality. You cannot speak about a personal experience of some supernatural idea which nobody else probably may have that same experience. So you have to be little careful about this question of personal experience. Clarity and precision, we already discussed that, but again, you should not have vague generalities. Now, what do you mean by vague generalities? You may have certain specific, study that is done in a specific context, or you may have a specific experience in a specific context. You cannot generalize that to everybody. It's like saying, suppose a man who falls in love with a girl and then gets hurt, he ends up saying, women, they are very hurtful. No. You can say, the woman whom you love, she was hurtful. Now, you cannot make vague generalities. Now, in our ordinary conversation, we do that, but you cannot do that when you write a scientific paper. That is an example I gave you. But then, for that matter, anything at all, we can say like that. Okay, scientific language is precise. So you need to make nuanced, qualified statements. Now, what do we mean by nuanced, qualified statements? One of the things that we need to be clear is you have to be very specific about what you are saying. You have to make nuance. See, for example, you can say, students who are, with my study, I can come to conclude, students with a certain particular academic background tend to perform this particular course well. Now, typically, students with mathematics background tend to do logic well, but based on a certain availability of evidence. So, what would be the availability of evidence that I would have here? About their participation in the class, about their grades, about the way in which they could take questions and respond in the class discussion and so on. Yes, you kind of, that is a qualifier. You cannot say, students in JDB are excellent in logic. No, that is a vague generality. There are some, yes, but what kind of students, what background, or students who are not. So it's like saying sometimes, it's very easy to make vague generalities. When students, when they don't like one particular class, they will say, JDB professors, they are boring. Okay, probably you had an experience of one professor called Nishant who happened to give you a boring lecture. That doesn't mean every professor in JDB is boring. You understand? You have to make a nuanced, qualified statement. I'm just saying it as a joke. So the point of the matter is, all the professors can do the same thing. A few students may do sometimes, silly mistakes. So the professors have a tendency to say students are not serious about their studies. Yeah, this is all the mistake that we do. But in everyday language, you may say that. But you cannot do that in a scientific paper. You have to make qualified. You have to be qualified means you have to locate correctly to which group of people or events or things you are referring to. That's why qualified. So you are qualifying who or where or when, the specificity of something. That is also the idea of nuance. Dispassionate and objective. Obviously, one of the important things is you cannot distort data or views of others to support your point of view. Oftentimes, sometimes people do that. You have already a fixed point of view, so you want to hold on to that. You begin to distort the data that is existing. This can happen very often with people who are very, very, rigid about a particular position they have. So they tend to distort, not because they want to, but they just even unaware they do that. But that goes against certain intellectual honesty, because we have no right to distort somebody's views. We have no right to distort the data. Like, for example, if somebody argues in favor of a secular view of ethics in a company where people from different cultures and different religions work, so we cannot adopt a particular religious view or a particular cultural view, you cannot immediately misinterpret and saying that person is against religion. So we do that. That person has no concern for religion. You see, he wants something called secular. What is the secular? This purpose is different. So you are misinterpreting his view and making him look very bad, just because you want to have your religious view to be the ethical view on a matter. So that could be an intellectual dishonesty. So you should have intellectual honesty. You cannot be intellectually dishonest. So you have to be fair to the points of view you wish to contest or refute. You remember the fallacy of the straw man, I said? Yeah, this would be, you cannot do the fallacy of the straw man. You cannot caricature the view of somebody and attack the person on the way you have presented his or her point of view. You have because already distorted his point of view, and then you cannot do that. So it's similar to the same idea. And then another thing is, you don't omit facts or information that is inconvenient to you. Sometimes we tend to do that. We only pick and choose what we like. I mean, this is typically sometimes what people do with the religious texts, they will pick and choose what that suits them. And there are also other texts which they wouldn't like to, pick and choose. More of that in the discussion I will come. So this is a quote from Cicero. Keep this quote in mind. Dare not to say anything which is false, or fear to utter anything that is true. In other words, do not have the courage to say anything that is wrong, and have the courage to say anything that is right. So that is a very, very, very good principle also applied to scientific writing. Critical basically means an evaluative study. You are not merely restating those ideas, but you are evaluating it. You are evaluating means you are trying to appropriate those ideas and see, when I am trying to apply in this particular context of my study, I find these are worthwhile aspects and these are not that helpful aspects, and these are some of the difficulties that a particular author has in his writing, etc., and so on. So you look at the positive and the negative aspects, but at the same time keep your prejudices out of question, because sometimes you can simply be prejudiced about an author or a particular point of view the author has, and that's not the reason why you evaluate the author. Parsimony, as I told you, is economy of words. Avoid unnecessary and irrelevant discussion. Sometimes people, it takes completely your writing away from the focus. Your focus is to drive one singular claim, and all other things are helpful to lead to affirm with clarity and precision that particular claim that you want to establish. So there may be so many wonderful ideas you may come across while you are reading, but they may not be directly contributing to your study. But then they are so nice. Oh, it is so nice. Somehow I should have it somewhere. Some people have this tendency. Whatever they know, they have to say. Now, you don't need to say whatever you know. You only need to say whatever is relevant to the particular topic under discussion. Avoid repetitions. I already said that. So this is my personal tip. Some papers are like the homilies of some priests. They go round and round, and neither they know what they want to say, nor do we get what they want to say. They just take you for a ride. You know, they go round and round saying things that are totally irrelevant, nothing to do with what they really want to say, or perhaps they have nothing else to say. They just are unprepared and they just come and while their time and waste your time. So don't do that. That is not how you write a scientific paper. Stages in writing a scientific paper. Now, I'll quickly browse through the topic because each of that we are going to look at a little more in detail. Okay, you need to choose a topic first, which we have already said that. We need to delineate the scope of the paper. These words that I have underlined are important. I'll explain each of that in a moment. You need to have a working bibliography. Then of course you need to read those references. You need to know how to take notes. You need to prepare an outline, and finally you compose the paper. Now, choosing a topic, you need to keep few things in mind. I can be very quick here because these are merely informative. The fact that you choose a topic, it means it should have some significance to your own life and also to the intended readers you have in mind. Because when you write a paper, you have a target audience. You are not writing for for everybody or anybody. So would that be significant for them? It's like, for example, I write every month a column in Fortnightly magazine or a paper called Light of Truth, that is published from Kochi. Now, I know who my intended readers are. So accordingly, I will choose a topic that would be somehow addressing their concern. So I cannot write about anything I know. No. So that you keep in mind. It should be also relevant to you, your own life in some day. You cannot write about something totally that is not significant to you. Again, when you choose a topic for a scientific paper, make sure you have got enough resources available. So you should have a good library facility or internet facility or whatever that is helpful. Now, delineating the scope of paper. The common mistake is people cast the net too wide. Now, if you are a fisherman, you know what I mean. If you cast the net too wide, you hardly are likely to get hold of anything at all. You need to cast the net sufficiently wide, but not too narrow, but not too wide either. So you cannot choose a topic which is too broad that you cannot say anything at the end, nor can it be too narrow because you will not be able to develop it. So the scope is exactly, this is the boundary within which I am going to work. So better to begin a topic which is narrow in scope, which is more focused rather than too broad and therefore less focused. If necessary, you can expand the scope gradually. If you do the other way about, it is waste of time and energy. Preparing bibliography, obviously you need to consult a library and libraries and do library research. Today it has become much easier. There are a lot of online resources that you get. For example, JDB has for you that particular EBSCO, and I'm sure the librarian has told you how to make use of that. That is for some articles. Then you also today have a lot of what is known as a Google Scholar. I don't know, some of you are aware of it. That's a wonderful thing. You go and identify what are the topics available in that. You may not get the entirety of the work there sometimes, then you'll have to go and find out where you can get it, but at least it gets an idea about the particular literature available in a particular area of study. There are many such databases today available. The Google Scholar is one such thing which currently many students normally use. So you may look into that. There are many, you guys are much more versatile when it comes to e-learning. So you must be able to figure that out, many things. And today you have got many of those PDF files available online. You have got many of even sometimes some of those audio files are available. Instead of reading, you just listen to them. Sometimes you have even video files. Somebody narrates that to you with some kind of annotation and things like that. That's also possible. You may have to, this means certain amount of search that you need to do, consultation. Alright. Also you can ask people who are knowledgeable where you can find these resources or what are the possible resources possible. Now, the tip that you need to remember about bibliography is you should be able to choose essays or articles or books that are published more recently. You cannot just, unless if it is a classic, like a work of Plato, work of Aristotle, work of Augustine, work of Aquinas, work of Duns Scotus. Okay, I mean those are, work of William Ockham or whatever it is. So those are of classics. If you are referring to some of those ideas, yes. But on a particular topic itself, a debated one, you need to look at the most recent publication. This reason is very simple, because the most recent publication would have also included all that has been debated earlier. So the more recent one you read, you also know what has been said earlier about the topic, but also you get to the new perspective. So that is the reason you have to get hold of the most recent one. You cannot, for example, read books that are published 50 years ago. They would have been outdated by now. Others would have come and refuted it. They might have come up with a better theory, better explanation. So that is what you need to get hold of. Now, reading, I know this is the most difficult thing because we have lost that culture. Yesterday, I was having a little debate or discussion with our new president. He was also lamenting that we are losing reading, but then he said, yeah, today no youngsters, they don't read. I said, I beg to disagree, because I know university students, they read. I give them a book and they say, by next week we have a discussion on this book. They come well read with a lot of questions. So the problem is not about the youngsters in general. That is a vague generality. The problem is with our students, because our students somehow think that their focus is something very different. This is only a necessary evil for them to climb the ladder of hierarchy. So they are not interested in, sorry to say that, we are not serious about our studies. This is only a necessary step for you are all waiting for when I can get the cassock, when I can get, I don't know what are the other things involved in that. I don't want to get into the details about it. Your eyes are fixed elsewhere. Your eyes are not in our achievements in academics. So sadly, in the same work I give to a secular student, one book I give, bulky book of 400 pages, and say, next week, this time, we shall come and discuss that. You would be amazed the amount of questions they are capable of asking, because they have read and come. Now, therefore, the reading habit is something that a particular section of the society is missing today, especially people like us who are much used to quick, short video clips watching and, thinking that we have understood everything. We are missing the point, because reading has its greatest advantage. It makes us to think carefully, critically, and rationally. Your video thing wouldn't do that. It may have certain emotional appeal for a moment, because it is very appealing to the thing. But if you seriously think about some of those things, it doesn't really have that. I'm not saying that is not a good medium. It is a good medium. But oftentimes my own fear is a lot of videos are mere brainwash. It's like, the commercials. The commercials can be powerfully attractive, but the commercials are misleading as well. They don't tell you anything true. They don't help you to even critically think. You are simply swayed away by the way the commercial is presented with all that elegant images that they are able to portray right before you. But in reading, it doesn't happen that way, because it immediately stimulates your mind. It makes you to think. My own suggestion to you guys is, if you are not at ease with reading huge philosophical work, start reading simple works like nice novel. When I say novel, I mean really good novel that also captures some of the existential aspects of our life. Some, real life kind of literature are there. Obviously, Shakespeare is one such thing that is always very helpful. Most of the philosophers have well read Shakespeare. They quote him oftentimes. Shakespeare comes back and forth. Contemporary philosophers I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the ancient ones. So, for example, but okay, so even Shakespeare, if it is difficult, identify some other novels, wonderful novels are there. Okay, so pick them up when you have free time. Read them. It stimulates your thinking. Then work your way through to a little bit of essay type and things like that. You have to cultivate this habit of reading. Without reading, I'm sure we would lose many of our things. I am aware of the fact that times change, but people are fast-moving world. But take time, take a step back, sit in your garden, and whenever you have a time, occasionally read. That is one of the points I said in my mass introduction about John Mary Vianney. Many people think he was a fool. No, he was not a fool. He didn't know Latin well. That is the only point. But he was a voracious reader. Even the little time he had, he has read the whole of the fathers of the church. And every time when he had free time, he was regularly reading the annals of the Society of the Propagation of Faith to keep himself up to date about what the teaching of the church is. Okay, he's reading as a particular purpose, as a pastoral need, but you're reading as a student, it will have another purpose. So, you should have a planned reading, not just at random reading something, and some orderly way, especially when you are writing a scientific paper. Cultivate the reading habit. Prioritize your bibliography. Don't start reading the books as you are picking up, etc. Don't read anything and everything. You will lose time because you are reading for a particular paper, particular research. Begin with books which are most recent date. Okay. Start with the most recent and comprehensive book on the topic, then work backwards. How do you know which is the most recent, most comprehensive? Again, you will get it in the Google Scholar. You will go into any of the encyclopedia or even online. You will find on a particular topic what are the books published year-wise, and sometimes you get a small summary of that as well. What is the focus of that book? So you need to have this preparatory work done very correctly. All right. Taking notes. Okay, now this can be a little difficult for us because we don't have this habit of writing anymore. But even if you don't write today, most students would use their laptop because you don't have a laptop. If so many of you have a phone, of course it is difficult. Then you have to go to the traditional mode of writing. Now when you take notes, you may sometimes take literally the words of the author for the sake of accuracy. That is a literal transcription. You write word by word how the author said, but not everything of that book, something that you think is relevant to your particular point. Sometimes you can summarize in your own words, and this is very important. One of the things that you have in the schools and so on, when I was a school kid, we had that as part of our high school. We should be able to do what is known as précis writing, or comprehensive writing. What does it mean is they will give a text and they say now you summarize in less than this many words, and you should have that idea, but now you are not saying exactly in the words of the author but your own words. That's a skill by itself. It's not very difficult. If you have already in the school time we had it, so I'm sure you must have had it. If I had it, you should have had it. It's a very sometimes it can be very entertaining exercise. I like doing those kind of things a little bit. Very refreshing also sometimes if you do that. Try to summarize in your own words what somebody else does, what the author has said. Sometimes you may not even, you simply kind of note that particular idea and then the reference to the page, especially if you have the copy of the book with you, either the soft copy or the real copy, hard copy. So if you have the e-copy, then you can go and check your computer or whatever it is. If you have the hard copy, you can always, or even if your library has, give that stack reference. Whenever you want, you can go and pick up. You don't need to even summarize that. Give this idea is found there, so you can always go and see for easy accessibility. Sometimes people for a particular topic, if they find a particular magazine or newspaper has a recent article on that, they would like to keep paper cuttings of that. Sometimes today you can make a photocopy and keep if it is necessary. Don't unnecessarily make photocopies as well. So you also may note down your own personal observations and comments as you are reading your work. Certain questions may come to your mind, you also may note down. Preparing an outline. So before you start composing the text, you must have an outline ready. Okay, that should be rather, fairly a meaningful outline. So an outline is only a guide. It often gets modified as one reads more and start composing. So the outline need not be a very rigid one. So for example, if your seminar guide asks me, give me an outline, it's normally a tentative one. So the outline is, I'm going to discuss this first and then this second and this third and so on. But it might change as you keep reading, and then you might, when you compose the paper, it may be really different. Okay, now let us quickly look at the parts of the paper. I will come back to some of these things next lecture. Have a look at it. You see there are some preliminary pages. Now this, most of that may not apply to your seminar paper. This is for a master's dissertation or a doctoral dissertation. Nevertheless, it is important for you to know. But certain things will apply in the preliminary. For example, you are expected to have a title page. I will share with you a sample of the title page later. Dedication and acknowledgement you may not have. Table of contents you may have. List of tables, list of figures, list of abbreviation, any of these things you may not have. That is mostly for master's level or the doctoral level. So a title page you need to have, a table of content you need to have. Point 1 and 3. In the text, you need to have an introduction, you need to have the main body of the text in different chapters, and you will have a general conclusion. So there are 3 aspects. In the reference, you will have bibliography and sometimes appendix if there is any. So mostly you will have only the reference bibliography. So for your purpose, you need to have in the preliminary title page, table contents, in the text introduction, different chapters that comprise the body of the text, then conclusion. Finally, you will have the reference or bibliography. I am going to skip this whole idea of preface. Anyway, you have it in this one because you can see that. What do you have in the table of contents? You know that. This is how it will look like. The numbering will be slightly different for the preface if you have, but from introduction onwards it will be the numbering, page number will be in this Arabic numerals 1, 2, 3, then chapters and conclusion, notes, endnotes, list of references. Okay, now introduction. Introduction is introducing the topic and the research problem. It has 2 major aims. The problem in the context of our study. Now the context would mean both the literary context and the historical context. The literary context would mean that you are situating the problem in the availability of literature that are there. So the literature review therefore becomes part of an introduction. Of course, the historical context, your own context in which the study is somehow helpful. Arousing or stimulating the interest in the reader. Your introduction should have this purpose that the reader should find it interesting to read the rest of the paper. If your introduction is very boring, then the reader is going to give up. In large papers, the introduction can be a chapter by itself. In shorter ones, it should be just a paragraph or 2. Normally for your seminar paper, it would be a short introduction. Introduction should include the problem being investigated, very clearly said, the purpose of the study or the rationale of the study and its importance, and how the present study differs from the previous ones in approach or content. That is where the literature review comes into play. So you are going to say different people have said this and this, not in a detailed way, but this has been left out and this perspective has been ignored and whatever it is. So I would like to build from this point of view. Sometimes if there are important concepts, you need to give definition, you have to give the methodology or sources of data, you have to give a preview of the organization of the paper, meaning to say in the first chapter we will be focusing on this aspect, in the second chapter this. So you have to give you write the introduction always at the end, you don't begin writing the introduction. So though the reader begins reading the introduction is the last one you will be writing because it's only after the paper is complete you will write it. The body of the text is an orderly and logically divided exposition of the material. You should avoid two important pitfalls: treating the same topic in different parts. Now, this is the problem. Sometimes people discuss the same thing in the first chapter and then come back to the fourth chapter or third chapter. No. That would be considered redundant and useless repetition. Don't do that. So, some papers can be very annoying that way. So, another thing is, you cannot presuppose, some earlier, in presupposing what will be treated in the subsequent parts. When you write the earlier parts, you cannot presuppose the author would know what you are treating in the subsequent parts. If so, you have to specifically say, this particular aspect we shall take up in the details of which will be discussed in the following chapter or the third chapter. So that will be very clear in the body of the text. Okay, two ways of numbering. I'll come back a little later. Conclusion ties together the whole paper. It can be done in very different ways. It could state or restate the developments of the previous chapters, the conclusion that you have arrived at. Conclusion is normally the findings that your paper offers something new, which the previous study has not given. Practical and policy implications of your findings. And you may have to also state the questions the study has left unanswered, which will also lead to suggestions for further research. So your conclusion is always better to be open-ended. So it's not that you have a conclusive answer for everything. There are certain things that we couldn't discuss that is beyond the scope of this paper, but this can be further studied, and then state what are those things that could be studied later. Appendix is only a supplement to the paper, a material that is useful and has some bearing on the topic, which probably you are not bringing as part of your discussion in the paper. You only made a reference. So you don't want to include in the body of the text because it impedes the flow of the text. For example, if you are using a quantitative study questionnaire or sometimes detailed data tables, some scales or indices that are used, etc., can be given as appendix. In which case, in the body of the text, you will mention in that particular place, refer appendix 1, appendix 2, whatever it is. Okay, I think I shall stop here, and then the documentation part I will take up a little later because that has to be done a little elaborately. Probably I will take that up tomorrow. So if these things must be clear to you, what are the things that how to write a scientific paper? I basically said some general tips, the features of the scientific paper. Then I began about choosing the topic, also choosing the bibliography, and then reading and taking notes, and then some important contents of the paper, including the introduction, the main body of the text with many chapters, and the conclusion. But of course, there could be preliminary, which would include the title page and the table of contents, and in the after the main body of the text, you will also have something like bibliography. So these are the major appendix if necessary. These are the major things that we have discussed so far. So we shall now take some time for discussion before we end the lecture. Thank you.